Hey everyone, how's it going? Bowser the Healer here, and I want to get into this one quickly. I have a quick start guide for Augmentation. This is sort of a beginner slash good opening build to help you get into the game of Mythic Plus a little bit faster. So we're going to start with rotation and whatnot and a quick run through of the abilities so that if you're trying to run into a key quickly, I got your back. And if you want to join me for the deeper dive, I'll be doing that later in the video. I do plan on releasing a full guide later this month where I go through all the nitty-gritty details. Now, if you like augmentation content or healer content, get subscribed, but let's not waste any more time. The first ability we need to talk about is Ebb and Might. Ebb and Might gives you and your 4 nearest allies more damage by giving main stat out. You get 14% more damage and everyone else is getting 15% of your main stat. This is a wonderful buff and it has damn near infinite range. It goes through walls, line of sight, etc. So you press this in Mythic Plus and you have safely given the entire party Ebb and Might. So that's a pretty big deal. Now, once you press it, you're going to get a little bar with a timer here. Then I recommend hitting Upheaval. Then I recommend full charging your Fire Breath if you can. Maybe press an Eruption or two. And now you're good to go. You can press Prescience to hope for an Essence Burst and to continue buffing your allies. Throw a Leaping Flame, Living Flame to hopefully get some Essence Burst procs. And then run through your Essence the fastest you can. Because all of this is extending Ebb and Might. Now, I just ran out of Ebb and Might, but notice I was only 4 seconds out from Ebb and Might being back up. And so you might want to wait for your empowered abilities to come back, but you don't have to. Do this rotation over and over again, and essentially you're doing your job on this class. Now, there are some variations to this, but the basic rotation's easy. What's not so easy about this class is making sure you're lining up with cooldowns and making sure you're working the best you can with your teammates to, provide as much damage as possible. You have a major cooldown of Breath of Eons. It's a 2-minute. You fly over targets, and any targets that you hit store 21% damage taken for 12 seconds. Now, it doesn't remove or steal any damage. So any damage that's being outputted during this is going to go through just fine. But Breath of Eons will copy that damage and store it. Then when it's ready to pop, it'll critical the damage, doubling it, and that's going to blast all the enemies. It's a very fun button, and you'll have to see it once or twice to really understand it, but it also gives you a bit of Ebb and Might. Note that players need to be affected by Ebb and Might in order for Breath of Eons to be working. So if you're only pressing Breath of Eons and, for instance, not stacking your Ebb and Might timer, yeah, you might run out of damage into Breath of Eon. So make sure you're pressing Ebb and Might with this button at some point. I recommend pressing Ebb and Might first, but it's a huge button. Use it as often as you can in a key and try to only hold it for giga pulls where you're going to get a ton of value out of it. You don't want to be missing too many pulls without pressing Breath of Eons. So try to keep this on cooldown and really help your team just do a ton of damage. The other really important part about this class is the utility. We have a 20-second kick with the way we talent, and we have a group-wide defensive. Obsidian Scales is going to give, it's just under 20%, the number's escaping me, but you give essentially a rallying cry to your team when you hit Obsidian Scales, providing a boost to your maximum health. That's incredible. You can use this kind of like a gigantic group defensive that you can have 2 charges of. Super strong, you can totally save a group with it. And then the same talent lets Hover give your team 40% movement speed for a few seconds. So if you need to get out of a mechanic and everyone else has to, you're going to hit Hover and everyone's going to get out of it faster. Lots of team play here, lots of cool stuff you can do with that. We also have to remember that we have Spatial Paradox, which makes you and a friendly nearby healer cast while moving and have 100% more range for roughly 12 seconds. This is a pretty big deal, and it's a very fun thing to give your healer. You also have Blistering Scales, which provides armor to the target, and when melee attacks happen against that target, the scales explode, dealing damage. Now, this is great for a tank on a startup pull, but with the way we tell it, it's also a shield. So if a teammate ends up getting hurt, you can quickly throw a Blistering Scales on them to keep them alive, but note that you can only have one out at a time. So it's great to open a pull with Blistering Scales and then use it again later to potentially save a player who might get hurt.
Bowser the Editor here. If you hit Blistering Scales while targeting a mob, it doesn't actually apply to you. It'll actually apply to the target that has the most threat on the mob. So it's a nice and easy way to deliver it to your tank if you're ever feeling really lazy.
Now, I'm going to start getting into the nitty-gritty side of things, and there's a lot of details I skimmed over. So if this helped you get started into a dungeon, great, go off, tell me how it goes. But if you want to learn even more, let's deep dive the talent page. So when it comes to the talent pages, and I'm going to spend very little time over on the evoker side, and I also kind of expect that you know what some of the evoker buttons do. So when I produce like the big guide, I'll walk through every single button very carefully. However, we take basically everything up here for the sake of ease of use, right? Eruption dealing more damage, essence burst, the 20-second kick, and I don't know if Echoing Strike is better or worse than Pupil of Alexstrasza, but I know Pupil of Alexstrasza is at least consistent damage. So I'm running this talent right now because I haven't really experimented with the other one. Trust me, I'll get back to all of you on that one. So Upheaval's, of course, one of your empowered spells, one of your 2 empowered spells. So this will extend Ebon Might's duration, and it's a knock-up. The more you charge it, the bigger the range. It's a very hard-hitting move, and honestly, you'll cancel spells with it. So with some good timing, you might even be able to use Fire Breath first in hopes to use Upheaval to maybe interrupt a couple of spell casts. Now, it's not an interrupt, it's crowd control, so if the mob can't be knocked into the air, you won't be stopping a channel, but I think it's good to remember that this sort of effect exists in your kit, and you can use it as crowd control as well. You can also take Seismic Slam to stun mobs. You only need 1 point of this in Mythic Plus. If you're really lacking crowd control, this is a fun talent. I get the feeling this is used potentially a bit more in PvP due to the implications of it, but that being said, still, you have the options. It's crowd control in its own right, so it's strong. Breath of Eons, we've already gone over that in my quick rundown, but this move we combine with a talent down here, Overlord, so that when you hit targets, you're casting Eruption on them. You're casting 3 instances of Eruption, up to, I should say. For each target hit, you get an Eruption up to 3. And all of those Eruptions extend Ebon Might. And then Ebon Might is extended by Breath of Eons in the first place. So if you hit Ebon Might and then you hit Breath of Eons, you're gonna get a very fat initial timer. Now, this combo on a 2-minute cooldown will get you an Ebon Might so fat, you can kind of get through an entire pull. I mean, I got us through entire pulls on a 20 that were, you know, pretty lengthy on a fortified week, and it was breezy. I kept Ebon Might up almost the whole time with incredibly small amounts of downtime because of that combo. Now, you can get the downtime pretty low on the frequent anyway, but the combo with Breath of Eons is just so strong, so just remember that. So this cheat death heals your team. It restores 198,000 health to you, and I'm at 45 item level right now, and 66,000 to 4 nearby allies over 9 seconds. The healing starts high and then declines over the duration. Now, it's 6 minutes to get your cheat death back up, but it heals everyone around you. So if you're going to die, don't try to waste too many resources on yourself to save yourself. It's okay to kind of let this pop first and then start healing. If it's some unbelievably lethal mechanic, please try to stay alive most of the time. Reduce the essence costs of Eruption. That's pretty important for keeping Ebon Might up. Now, Blistering Scales. I just loosely went over this one. Put it on the tank at the start of a pull or before a pull. It lasts forever, right? So they're going to have the shield on them for basically ever until it gets utilized. And then reapply to anyone who's hurt. This is the talent that provides the shield, and then this talent actually makes it do more damage, and it's actually a pretty significant amount. However, if you're, say, in a carry group and you need some of the higher utility talents in this talent tree, then feel free to get rid of something like Reactive Hide in order to get over there. But I really like the damage output that it provides. Just, you know, don't forget to put it on your tank. Okay, over here, we have Draconic Attunements. You're gonna have the Black and Bronze Attunement. It's a passive, an additional passive to your normal Blessing of the Bronze. The Black Attunement's gonna give your whole party 4% maximum health, and Bronze Attunement will give you and your 4 nearest allies 10% increased movement speed. Now, you're gonna wanna toggle between these two whenever possible to optimize. And furthermore, with the next thing we're about to talk about, it'll swap these on you when you activate it. So it's important to keep a button around to swap between these two whenever you need to. Incredibly useful utility, and it's just a passive. Spatial Paradox, I already covered this one. 100% range to a nearby healer, and they can cast while moving for 12 seconds. Spirit Walker's Grace for a friend. What's not to love? This is awesome. But if you have like a melee healer on your team, or someone with a lot of mobility, or a healer that simply doesn't feel like they need it, feel free to swap this for another utility talent as needed. Speaking of utility talents, before I go any lower, Chrono Ward here is amazing because the shield lasts a long while on your team, and when you use Breath of Eons, you essentially give everyone a shield. It's excellent, it's good value, but you don't really need it in a dungeon. So I like having it, and when I can take it, it's nice to have. But feel free to get rid of this if you want points for a different build, or if you're struggling to fit all your points down here where it gets a little challenging, then you can always take something out of this. I also want to note that stretch time makes you basically get a time dilation from preservation while flying. Yeah, that makes Breath of Eons just a little easier to use when like the floor is lava. So also remember that while you're playing. So let's talk about this busted talent. Aspect's Favor. We put both points into it. When you hit Obsidian Scales, it's 16%. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. When you hit Obsidian Scales, there's a 16% increase to maximum health. This works just like Rallying Cry, which means it kind of functions like a defensive. So you can use this to help your whole team mitigate damage. But then if you press hover, you're going to get 40% speed for almost 5 seconds to your team. Now, it only works to the same 5 people that the Black and Bronze Attunement work for, but it's a pretty big deal to have that much control that often in a dungeon. All of your hover charges, all of your Obsidian Scale charges. Oh, that's really powerful. So learning to optimize this is massive and can make crazy differences in your run. But note, activating one does change your attunement. So if you hit Obsidian Scales, you're going to swap over to Black Attunement. So if you were hitting that, but you need people to run out of a mechanic, then they're not going to be getting help from your Bronze Attunement, and vice versa. I also legitimately haven't tested if there's anything cool where you can swap in the middle of using one of these and transfer the buff to Bronze Attunement. I don't know. I will look into that, and I will have answers for you later. Lower on the tree, let's start talking talents. Symbiotic Bloom is going to increase healing by 3% and 6%, depending on the rank it is, for almost 12 seconds. And then there's one down here, Prolong Life, that allows you to further extend the healing buff based on Ebb and Might. So anything that extends Ebb and Might will extend the healing buff. If you feel like the group needs more healing, this is actually a really powerful angle to look at it by. I think there's a lot you can do with Symbiotic Bloom and Prolong Life, but it's going to depend on your class. Or not your class, excuse me, your composition. But if you have a healer that's maybe under geared or something, this could be a nice little way to help push them through, especially given that you can give a healer 3% more damage and healing with Potent Magic over here. More on that later. Prescience is a move we need to talk about, and I will be re-talking about this in the rating section, but for us Mythic Plus players, you press Prescience and it goes on the other 2 DPS, and not you, which is probably for the best. So just keep slamming this move whenever you got a free GCD. It is worth giving that 3% out. But I also take Anachronism. Oh, I think I said that. Yeah, I said that right. Prescience has a 35% chance to grant an Essence Burst. This is huge. You're pressing that button all the time. Why not get some free eruptions out of it? That's more damage. That's more Ebb and Might uptime. We love that. Now, Fate Mirror, I want this move to be good, but my prescience uptime hasn't been perfect. I plan to test this one, but it felt a little underwhelming here on live. So I'll get back to you all on this one, but right now I'm not recommending it. Also, in terms of things I'm not recommending, Momentum Shift is a nice talent. Feel free to get rid of this if you're in need of a talent point for a certain composition. And who doesn't want 5 and 10% more intellect? But then over here, Motes of Possibility. So you get these motes that drop, and they can drop 10 seconds off of a big cooldown. However, the issue with this talent is you don't reduce enough that you get a bonus cast of a major cooldown. And in higher keys, it's sort of just a net loss of a talent point, because even if you could reduce 30 seconds off a major cooldown, there's a real chance that you are going to be holding it at the end of a pull, so that the next pull you can pop off your big button. And how much time is between those 2 pulls? Sometimes that is 20 or 30 seconds. So this sort of turns into, I don't feel like I get enough out of it. In Raid, I get Inferno's Blessing and Plot of the Future. I'm not sure if they're worth it yet, but Plot of the Future gives you essentially Bloodlust. every time you Breath of Eons. However, in Raid, you get some crazy uptime with it, and that can be really good for gigantic damage windows. But for us in Mythic Plus, I don't feel like it's worth 2 talent points to climb all the way down here when I feel like there are stronger effects on the board that we can grab. Accretion is going to make it so that your upheaval's reduced by 1 second every time you cast an eruption. This is a really good interaction. This is sort of what makes it fit into the Ebb and Might window so often and so easily. So I highly recommend we grab that. And then here's the talent that makes our Breath of Eons cast some eruptions, which is more damage and more Ebb and Might uptime for only 1 more point, which I really like. Time skip is a really big talking point, and I want to address it. Well, right now, it's a 3-minute. Now, it reduces your cooldowns at base, roughly, I think 24 to 26 seconds, something along those lines. And it's good. Like, it's really good. And I think if you were playing in tournament, you would want to run time skip every single time and use that 3-minute, because you just get so much value out of that, and you could probably really make some stuff happen. But also, that's a lot of upkeep. The 3 minutes can feel a little weird, and sometimes I think it makes the window between Ebb and Mights a little too long for my liking. Something about the 3-second reduction I have on this from the passive Interwoven Threads feels better, reducing all of your cooldowns by 10%. And it's everything, right? It's all of your spell abilities, it's all of your abilities by 10%. I prefer this. It feels better in dungeons. It makes things flow a little better. It reduces some of the need to optimize something that you might not necessarily have a good grasp on how your party might handle it. So time skip's good. Time skip in Raid is really, really good, but feel free to run this passive. And there are going to be some people who say they only run time skip. There's some people who will probably only want to run Interwoven Threads, and I think that's all okay, honestly. Feel free to move talents around as needed, of course, on this right side. There's a lot of cool utility here to play with, depending on if you're carrying, or you have a big group, or you have a certain kind of healer that maybe you want to help or don't want to help, or they don't need spatial paradox. Play around with it and have fun with it. But this build's pretty straightforward, provides a ton of utility. And again, I've cleared a 20 freehold and a 19 Brackenhide, like, effortlessly. I also cleared the mega dungeon with it. It's very effortless. It's a very nice, fun build with a good amount of utility, and I hope you enjoy it. But on the left side, let's talk left side real quick. So I recommend what I'm running right now, because that means you get stuns. That means you can give your healers some mana and this brand new buff for 3% more damage and healing. And it comes with all the bells and whistles, but there's a lot of room to play with the new talent system. If you think Spiteful Week deserves Forger of the Mountains, yeah, you know what? Go for it. If you want extra CC, you'll get a lot of value out of that. If you don't feel like you're going to be using the healing stuff, get rid of Bountiful Bloom. There's a decent amount of flexibility in this tree, and now that we're on this patch, so play around with these, right? Maybe you feel like you have enough defensives, you don't need Zephyr, or maybe you feel like you have enough crowd control with Upheaval and you don't need Terror of the Skies. Get fun, enjoy yourself with it. Seriously, there's a lot of customization to be had, but I do recommend always trying to grab Potent Mana, as this is just so nice to give to your healer. It's a lot of free value. Okay, when it comes to rating, I only have one thing I want to tell you all. The rest of what I want to tell you is in the next section. Prescience gives priority to Ebb and Might. So let's say you have 2 pumpers in your party. Try to hit a prescience on one of them in the pre-pull timer at a roughly 12 or 13 seconds, and then give the other prescience to the other pumper, then hit Ebb and Might, then hit your flight, and then do your rotation. Because that will ensure that 2 targets that you want are always getting Ebb and Might. It's very important for good damage. I didn't really understand that at first at Raid, and I really wish I did, so I want to make sure I made that knowledge public. Some final notes, and this is mostly like a data thing. Warcraft Logs isn't reporting augmentation data super accurately right now. Now, a lot of it is accurate, but there are some issues with pets and with certain cooldowns where it can't quite calculate how much you're contributing as augmentation, and something else about it just feels wrong to me. The dungeons that I've run with augmentation players, whether I'm healing them or I'm playing augmentation, have been stellar. When the augmentation player is doing well with Ebb and Might, I feel like we're just frying bosses and we're going through these huge heavy fortified packs easily. Now, I'm not sure if that's just because of what they bring in terms of damage and helping or what, but it doesn't feel bad at all to play with an augmentation. but the numbers are gonna look really weird, especially on details where you get beautiful details such as this, which I will show you. Where like in this Brackenhide Hollow, it says I only did 48k, whereas the Holy Paladin did 38k.
Hey everyone, Buzz the editor one more time. So details won't show you the amount of damage you contributed. It does give it to your teammates. So if you look at the logs, you're going to be like, wait a minute, why was my damage so low? But then on the contrary, if you go to Warcraft logs, it will try to separate the damage for you to tell you how much you did. Unfortunately, there are some issues with some of the hooks that they use to discover damage, so it might not be entirely accurate. My recommendation is to look at your details damage and your log damage to sort of get a benchmark of how well you did, and then, try to get those numbers up as high as possible, knowing that they might not accurately reflect exactly what you're contributing to a group, and you should be fine.
But that's going to do it for this video. I'm going to have a deep dive guide. I have a mega dungeon video probably coming up, but also I want to address the lack of healers or the community healing issues that have been popping up. I ended up asking a really good question about why people think that healers went missing, and I got some really good talking points from all of you. That's a really long comment thread, so thank you all for participating. I'm probably going to put out another question soon, so look for that, but lots more coming. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.